Leading to Here. Extraordinary stories from everyday leaders.
Welcome to Leading to Here. This is a podcast series where we will spend a little time with some of the people we've met and worked with at Think in Focus over the last 7 years. We're aiming to get under the skin of what drives them and learn more about what has shaped their career. I'm Rich, and with me today is Ricky.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we're talking with Ian James. Ian is Global Head of Risk and Control for a major global bank, and he says his purpose is to create personal and collective success, enabling everyone to achieve more than they believed was possible. Ian, welcome.
Well, good morning. Thank you. It's really good to see you both and to chat today.
Good to see you, Ian.
Great to have you along, Ian. Ian, one of the reasons we've asked you along is because you've got quite a progressive take on risk and building risk cultures. Just bring that to life a little bit for us. What does that mean? What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? I think in my experience, many risk managers have created their own language and they're almost their own place in the world, which is a little bit different to everybody else's. The way I see risk management, it's about fundamentally two things. It's about managing threat, so thinking about the things that could stop you achieving your goals, but then also opportunity. So using straightforward risk management thinking to really create success. And that really helps risk management become part of a culture and something that everyone can really buy into rather than have to endure.
Would you say that it is about the cultural dynamics rather than the process dynamics in terms of risk? Because if you can get people to follow something, but do they really believe in it and buy into it? Would that be fair?
Completely fair, Ricky. Someone asked me earlier this week, as they do often, what's the biggest risk we face? Without taking a breath, the answer to that question was culture. And, we've all heard the quotes about culture eating strategy for breakfast. Well, there's a really clear link there for me that if you haven't got the right culture, you sort of can't manage your risk very well. Culture's the answer.
Maybe we'll dig into that a little bit more then, so as we go through. But what when you say culture, what do you mean in terms of, is that like how people perceive risk and our attitude towards making sure that we're monitoring opportunity and threat? Is that what you mean? That there's a mindset that people have got that work in the company?
Good question. The thing about culture for me is it's just the way things are done around here. As a risk manager, I expect and hope people can be quite open about what's going on, what problems they're facing, where they've failed, where they're succeeding. And if culturally people find it difficult to talk about things that are going wrong because they're criticised or treated differently, then you sort of can't get under the skin of risk management and you sort of retreat back to that place where ticking the box is all that you can do. But actually, the value of risk management is enabling success. And that's why I think it links to my personal purpose. And I try and do this every day. So making sure that I'm thinking about success, linking what we do from a risk management perspective in a business, managing threats, to making sure that it's clearly evident how it adds value.
A really interesting answer, Ian, that. What you're thinking about there then is not just external threats to the bank. You're thinking about actually the culture it's an internal threat, isn't it? That if we're not comfortable to raise issues, raise problems, share what we feel or think, then actually there's an internal monster that could catch you out at some point.
Absolutely. I think there are times when you can see that playing out in all sorts of ways. I know I work really hard with people so that they don't suffer any negative consequence from speaking up. And, people who are in financial services, certainly in the UK, are aware of that phrase, speaking up and having a speak up culture. That's not only difficult if you're in an organisation that treats mistakes badly or with difficulty, it's also quite difficult if you're an introvert. So one of the things that I think differentiates standard performing risk managers with your maybe excellent risk managers is a real understanding of human behaviour and how people think about mistakes, opportunities, and creating their own success in an organisation.
Because you're talking about perhaps a different side of risk than you might typically hear people talk about. So I'm imagining there must be quite a lot of people that have similar roles to you. As Ricky said, they're focused more on processes than people. Is that fair?
I think it is absolutely fair. And, I'm lucky enough to work in a really big organisation. So all of that is true. What I find fascinating is how much of each do you need? So when I'm looking at a business and thinking about how it needs to manage its risk, for an immature business or for an immature team or something that's just been set up, you're going to need a bit more process in the beginning. But once your process is set out and you understand what risk managers might call the controls, you can then really put some energy into the cultural piece and say, actually, we can use this to enable success. And I absolutely convinced that if you use risk management thinking in the space of success, not just threat, it makes a business more successful and everyone in it.
I think having known you for many years now, Ian, I think your default position in all of that is how do we make something work? Whereas certainly my experience, having spent time in financial services from audit, risk, compliance, which of course risk is a lot more, it's a lot more mature in terms of how it understands business today and the challenges that it faces. But your default is, how do we make this work? Whereas traditionally it would be, right, how do we stop this? Almost like all the barriers go up. Now you've got to convince me this is worth doing. You start from the opposite thing. It's like, right, what do you want to do? And let's understand what that means for us from a risk compliance perspective, and where those threats exist. And I think that's something that's always struck me about you, is you always start from okay, let's see how we make this work then.
Thanks, Rick. It's right. I've got some real examples. I think in the past, previous organisation, I worked in the marketing function, really helping marketeers understand risk management. Well, marketing and risk management for most people, it's poles apart,
miles apart,
and it started like this. I'd get a call on a Friday afternoon saying, "Oh, we need to send this marketing material out. Will you approve it?" And I'm going, "No, because I've got other things to do." And it's Friday afternoon and I'm already thinking about watching the game of rugby tomorrow afternoon. But taking that opportunity and say, well, why didn't you talk to me about it 3 weeks ago when you came up with the idea?
Yeah.
Because 3 weeks ago, I could have helped you so much more to unclutter your mind and enable you. Those marketeers were actually self-filtering. What I mean by that is they were thinking, I've got this great marketing idea, but compliance will never sign it off, so I can't do it.
You see that all the time with companies we work with, where it's, you even see them talk themselves out of things, where they think, we've got a great idea, but they'll never let us, we won't do it then. Rather than thinking, well, what could we do? And working with someone like yourself.
Absolutely. And that's about being part of the solution, not part of the problem, isn't it? Being seen as adding value. It's quite a difficult game to get yourself as a risk manager into those conversations sometimes. I don't know whether I've invented this name, but I said, don't ask me to be tail gun Charlie. I can't follow behind your decisions and help you risk manage them then. risk management is about helping you make better decisions in the first place.
Yeah.
So don't come to me and tell me you've made a decision, help me manage the risk. Come to me and say, I'm thinking about making this decision. How can I make it better?
Let's go back a bit then here then.
Yeah.
Ian, how does someone get into risk management? So what was going on at home? Was it when you were younger, was this always a career path? Was it something that was in the family, or were you kind of like the first one to go down this route? What was going on back then?
Oh, crikey. Yeah, so I was brought up in the mid to late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Mum and dad were blue-collar workers, basically. And their perspective on life was as all of us, was geared by their experiences. The thing that they felt most dearly about my career was I needed to earn money, because that's the thing that they struggled with in the early part of their life. And it was really clear that they didn't mean it in a negative way, but it really mattered that I earned money. And I remember having a conversation with Mum saying, Mum, I'm not going to be a doctor, because that was her perspective of the best job with the best career and the best money.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had quite an interesting journey out of education, because I finished formal education at the age of 16. I didn't do A-levels, didn't do any. I did O-levels and got out. And I'd been kicked out of a secondary school in Birmingham. I accuse my friends of being the bad influence, but I think they might accuse me of being the bad influence at the time.
Hang on. You got kicked out. Come on. You can't leave that hanging. What?
Invited to leave.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think mum and dad were called into this secondary school, and it was explained that I wasn't really fitting in, and it was about time that I moved out. I think that was in third year senior school, so I don't know what that equates to now.
Yeah.
But it was. I just really hated the education system. It would just bored the life out of me.
Right.
And mum and dad weren't being negative. It's just that their perspective was, you've got to get your exams, you've got to get a good job, you've got to get money, and then you can live your life, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because of my behaviour, mum and dad ended up paying for me to go to a small private school for 3 years.
And so how did that work out then? So you've kind of rebelled in one school, now you're in a private
So you've been rewarded for this bad behaviour.
Well, you say rewarded. The school is actually now, the building itself is part of a hospital in Birmingham in Edgbaston. It was a very small private school, and mum and dad realised it was either me going to another comprehensive school and making the same mistakes, or being put in quite a disciplinarian regimed school. So that was very, very strong on its discipline.
So they were managing risk right there, weren't they?
Yeah. We can't manage this young man, so we're just going to put him in a basic education prison.
We're going to outsource it.
Yeah, and actually, a lot of my friends at that school were misfits from the education system at the time.
Yeah,
but there was no careers officers. There was no way forward, and they were successful in what they set out to do. They helped me get a number of O-levels, and then enter the world of work. And I joined Solihull Council as I think it was called a supernumerary, basically a clerical member of staff.
Yeah.
All my friends went off to do A-levels. I just joined as this basic clerical body in the council and started moving around the departments, just making the tea and doing the photocopying, that sort of thing. So
what was it like for you? You come out of sort of education, and it's not been an easy ride by the sounds of it, into work. Were you going then, oh, this is better, I'm enjoying this more? Or was it a complete culture shock for you when you're suddenly working in a council?
I think I enjoyed it far more because I got money in my back pocket. So I got myself a little car, and I could drive around and afford to do the things I wanted. My landscape was very small. So I ticked the box from mum and dad's perspective. I was earning a bit of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd tick the box from, my own perspective because I was having a nice life driving around, but it really wasn't a great foundation for any sort of career.
But did
But
you
it
got
did-
any idea at that point, Ian, then?
No.
So when did you stumble across risk and that kind of stuff? Where was that at Solihull, or was that somewhere else?
Yeah, so I profess to have a thread through even from that moment to this moment. So I ended up in the insurance office at the council.
Okay.
And I can't even remember what I was doing, to be perfectly honest. As I say, making the tea and doing the photocopying. From that, I moved into my first job in general insurance. It was actually at Norwich Union as a claims handler. So I then, insurance claims is all about risk, isn't it? I was dealing with motor accidents. And it's that long ago. There were paper files, and I remember sitting with these paper files and reading them and not really understanding what was going on. But that was my first step into a risk type job. And then then at that time, I stepped into a bit more formal education. So that was when I started studying the insurance exams because everyone was doing it.
Yeah.
I say it's interesting. I remember being on the bus coming home from college one night when the riots were kicking off in Birmingham. It's that long ago. There were riots in Handsworth.
Yeah.
We need a little translation there for the listeners that a buzz is actually a bus.
Yeah.
in the Black Country, it's a buzz.
Yeah, and I think we're the only part in the world where your mom is your MOM rather than your mum, which is MUM.
I think you're right there because my wife and her family are all from the Midlands, and they all say mom, and I thought that was dead weird when I first met them.
Yeah.
It's mom. What are you doing?
Yeah, for some of us we see it as dead right, but that's just anyone else's perspective.
But you go back there then. So you're on the buzz, and you've got terrible time in Birmingham around that point when you got all these riots going on and civil unrest. What was that like? And also, if you're working in insurance, there's an insurance risk right there, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think at that time, I wasn't really thinking about my career. I was just thinking about the next day or the next piece of my life. I was still living at home. Everyone was studying for the insurance exams. So that was the machine that was running. So there wasn't any rebellion against that. But no, it was very unsettling. And I remember going out for the evening and mum and dad being really concerned about, well, where are you going? Because they didn't know where I was off to or what I was up to, probably for most of my life, to be perfectly honest. But, they were always concerned, you're going anywhere near where the riots are. So, yeah, I mean, looking back, if that was happening now, I would be very concerned about social environment. But at the time, it was just water off a duck's back. I remember going into Birmingham for a night out, and nights out in those days were far different than they are now. You'd go to a pub, you go to a club. I'd get the bus home at 3:00 in the morning, and there really wasn't any danger around that. The world was a simpler place. But I was focused on get my exams done, and then during that time at Norwich Union, I realised I liked working with people, and they'd got this job called claims inspector, and I didn't achieve that job at Norwich Union. I moved to Sun Alliance. And Sun Alliance was a place where I really started to think, okay, I could be a claims inspector. I could get a nice company car. I can drive around to all these factories and places where things are happening, accidents had happened, interview witnesses, and, feel quite important. And I remember getting that job and thinking, this is it. I've made it.
You made it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Leading to Here. For mental models and tools for leaders, visit our YouTube channel, Thinking Focus.
So right there, then you can see you'd started to see some form of pathway in this sort of career. There's another role I could get, and it sounds interesting. And what's that about? And I get a car and all those sorts of things. So some ambitions starting to kick in.
Yeah.
Around that time, and so Sun Alliance, you go there. Tell us a bit about, were there any influences on your career? Anyone you were working with or managers you'd got that were starting to inspire you as well and make you think a little bit differently?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and there were two instances in my early claims inspector life that reminded me of the reality of the world. So my manager had been a claims inspector. So he'd been out on the road for 20 odd years, and his next career path was to become the manager of claims inspectors.
Yeah.
And he was a really, really lovely guy. But he confessed to me quite early on that he wished he'd stayed as a claims inspector. He said, because this isn't what I want to do. He said, I'm just managing people now. He said, and I love hearing about your problems, but I'm hearing about your problems, and I've got 12 other people who've got the same sort of stuff going on. But actually, I want to be out there doing what you're doing. She said, and he did. I remember him sitting in his office having a cup of tea with me one day saying, learn this lesson now. Always do the job you want to do. You know, think about, do I really want to be the manager? Because if you want to be a manager, you can manage anything, was his view. And he really, and he got some pain in his life because he really was quite jealous. And he loved coming out on those supervision days. You know, he'd come out and spend a day with you to watch how you worked because it reminded him of what he wanted to do. So Mike was a really, really big influence. And I remember that conversation even now.
It's interesting when people think that their only way to climb the ladder, and probably back then that's how it was to be the manager. And, you know, you're managing the team that you've kind of just been in or a similar team because they don't know whether you know anything else to manage others. To your point, you know, you can manage anything if you can manage. But we force people through these routes, these hierarchies, in order for them to progress, when actually we make them deeply unhappy, you know, and affect their engagement because they're going, well, I'm doing this because I have no choice, not because it's what I actually want to do and where I want to add the greatest value.
I think there's another side to that as well. I think I certainly think back and, you know, you sort of thought, manager, oh, that sounds good. That sounds like I'm getting on. I want to do that. So it's almost like your own ego gets fed. And you're right, Ian, you know, sometimes, and you see it even today, you get into those roles and people have done it for the wrong reason. Because they've done it because they think, right, this says something about me, rather than actually I want to do it because I love leading people or want to lead people.
That's what I think. And I remember, I don't think Mike was like this, but I've certainly seen it in other leaders and managers, is when they are in that position, they're more likely to become a micromanager, which is really, you know, not effective or good thinking, but they do because they know how to do the job and they want you to do it in the best way possible. And they think that the best way possible is potentially their way. So there's more likelihood from a micromanager emerging in that circumstances, in my experience, because they've got that perspective of how to do the job.
Well, we see it a lot in sales organizations or sales divisions where the logical next step is to manage a team, and yet the skill set to sell and be effective in that role is very different to the skill set of a sales manager or a sales leader. And it's these archaic internal progression structures or systems or processes that force people down this route because they want to get on. They might want to earn that bit more money. You know, families and all of those things kick in depending on where you are in your career. And all of that affects our choices, and we end up putting the wrong, you know, square pegs in round holes quite often, which is, again, linking it back to risk, not a good thing.
Ian, did you heed this advice then from Mike?
Without a doubt. I realised that, you know, I think every job I've taken since that moment, I've really, really wanted it, and wanted it with quite a passion. I might be a bit older now, but I do have a huge amount of enthusiasm for my job. I actually really, really love being a risk manager because it talks to my purpose. I did mention I got another experience when I was a claims inspector, and it was from a colleague. And Duncan, who was my mentor, and Duncan was probably 30 years older than me at the time. He was a proper Scots gentleman. He was brilliant at what he did. He was really good. And he had what I would only describe as a car park conversation with me. And I remember him taking me into the car park and saying, "Look here, sunshine. I know you're enthusiastic and I know you're pretty good at it, but unless you calm down and slow down, you're going to make the rest of us look rubbish. Will you just slow down, sunshine?"
Ooh.
And it was, and I remember even where we were standing in Birmingham at the time, and it was a real moment. I remember, as you can tell, I remember it now.
Yeah.
And the lessons I learned from that were quite important as well. So about how you start a new job, how you integrate yourself, and how you get to be part of the function or the team. You certainly don't put a shiny suit of armor on and come in and say, "I'm going to solve all the problems," because that just annoys everybody.
Again, you could have gone two ways with that. So I think what I'm hearing you say is you took some learning there about how to integrate into a team, how to work with a team, how to empower and make others feel good about what they were doing. But you could have taken that the other way and felt like you were having your wings clipped a bit there. Is that right?
Maybe it is, but I've never taken that option and that choice. You can do what you want in terms of trying to clip my wings. I'll find my own way forward. But I definitely saw it as a positive, which was saying that's not the impact you want to make.
Mm.
And that's the thing I take from that experience is what is the impact I want to make and how am I best to make that impact? And he was saying, you've come in without thinking about the impact you're having. And he was just giving me a little window into that world. And we became great friends as a result of his ability to speak up to me, be honest about his own, because he was being honest about his own vulnerability.
Yeah.
And saying, look, you're making me look a bit slow, but I do like playing golf on a Friday afternoon. So if you don't pack it in, I'm going to have to do some work then,
we talked about your purpose at the beginning and you've mentioned it since. So at this point in your career, you're at Royal Sun Alliance.
Yeah.
Had this purpose started to formulate in your mind around this time? Just to remind everyone what you talk about. You talked about create personal and collective success, enabling everyone to achieve more than they believed was possible. Was this in the back of your mind? Were you starting to find this? When did that start to come to the fore? Was it at Sun Alliance or was it when you'd moved on?
I'm not sure I would have said it at the time, but I think it was starting to emerge then. I think what happened was I was starting, I'd been a claims inspector for a number of years, and it was starting to affect my perspective on people. So when you're a claims inspector, you're looking for people who are fraudulently making insurance claims or malingering with their injuries. I was an injury specialist. So at that time, there was a lot of lawyers who were prepared to represent people. No win, no fee was starting to emerge in the market. Yeah. And I was dealing with more and more potentially fraudulent claims. And I was getting to the point where I was starting to believe that everyone was on the make as a person. And that's not really a very healthy thing to be like. And but I'd always been involved in training people in the function, been involved in helping people to be better at what they do. I'd be facilitating training sessions, all sorts of stuff. And I ended up being seconded into a huge project where I wasn't a claims inspector anymore. I was actually involved in change management. And I'd learned, I was spotted as someone who could engage people, help them to see a way forward. And because I was on the inside, it was more engaging. So I spent my last years at Royal Sun Alliance seconded to this really big project about changing the organisation. And that time was so formative for me in terms of purpose, helping people be successful, learning some of the skills of the trade of facilitating, coaching, teaching, all of those things started to build a different opportunity for me at that moment. So it's probably a good time to have asked that question.
Yeah, right. I mean, that again, it's almost like that gave you a new lease of life, didn't it? So it's not just you've got this real interest in insurance, in risk, in those things, and then this interest in people starts to come about. And I can see then how those two things start to come together to form this thought about purpose and where you want to go. So what happens next then? Royal Sun Alliance, you mentioned there you started to come to the end of your time there.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, and that was fed by a commute from Birmingham to Horsham twice a week, which was at a time when my children were very young.
Yeah.
We were struggling to cope with that lifestyle. I was learning loads and loving work, but those combinations of skills and desires led to me seeing an opportunity at Aon, where I got this role I think it started as a training and competence supervisor. So I ended up in what those of us in financial services know as a second line of defence role, overseeing basically people's competence.
Just explain that for a second line of defence. What, just for people listening, what do you mean?
Yeah, so in financial services, as in many industries, you've got the first line of defence where risk is managed and where operations happen. You've got a second line of defence where you've got jobs like compliance officers, legal officers, etc. And then you've got the third line of defence, which is audit.
Okay.
So the way an awful lot of risk management structure in organisations comes about now is in these three lines of defence. Just so you know, this was my foray at Aon into the second line of defence, but actually I'm a first line of defence guy. I manage operations, I manage risk rather than tell people how to do it. So yeah, but that role was about people. So are you competent to do what you're doing? How do we know you're competent? How do you demonstrate that competence? So my fascination with human behaviour and performance, plus my experience as a technical insurance professional, combined together to this stage of my career when I was into training and competence. And I ended up being in this funny role called a global competence policy manager. Mm-hmm. So how does an organisation know that all of its people are competent to do what it needs to do? And how do you evidence that in a really clear way to enable success?
Tell us a bit about that then, because some of the experience that many people listening might have had with competencies, people can often feel that they're being put in a box, that they're being judged. You know, are you competent? Are you not? Can you do it? Can you not? These are the standards we expect from someone in your role at this level. How did you help people overcome that feeling of judgment and the pressure that can bring?
Well, I think what I experienced, I mean, we mentioned my accent earlier about a buzz being a buzz. So I remember rocking up in Liverpool Street office to observe quite a senior client manager have a conversation with his customers to assess his competence. And as a black country guy rocking up in London with that job, there's quite a lot of barriers up. You know, the perception is, well, you're here to judge me.
Yeah.
You know, I actually don't need you in the room. I haven't had this before. Why are you looking at me? Yeah. So I couldn't stop it from the outset in terms of the perspective. But what I could do was change the impact of it. So as much as it was about, yes, you've ticked some boxes, you've said the right thing at the right time, which was very important at that time in life, I also then played into learning how to be a great coach, because it was clear that I didn't know how to be a client manager in that context, in that organisation, but I could help that person be better based on my observation of his skills. And I remember when in the interview for the job, I actually drew a Venn diagram of 3 circles for the guy who was looking to recruit me, and said, look, I'm just going to simplify this for you. I think competency is technical skill, critical thinking, and relationship management. These are the 3 circles. The competence you need is this sweet spot in the middle. So you can expect me to talk to people as much about their relationship management skills and critical thinking as you can about their technical skills, because actually the technical stuff is ticking the box and I've said the right thing in many cases. So it did give me the opportunity to then think more about personal behaviour, personal skills, relationship management, that type of stuff. And I loved the opportunity to coach, because that guy and I would then go for a cup of coffee afterwards in a local coffee shop, and I'd say, how do you think that went then?
So you were looking then to break some of the barriers down by not sitting there and then telling people what they did wrong, what they should have done differently, but you were looking to dig into their thoughts about what they could do differently, how might they do it better, what could possibly make this interaction more informative for the client, whatever. So you took that approach I'm assuming, which then removes some of the threat potentially.
Absolutely. And maybe Duncan was echoing in my mind about, be careful how you start this relationship. Because if my first conversation with a client manager was about how he'd failed on a technical compliance issue that I wasn't actually competent to tell him about, I was just reading a checklist, I think the relationship would have been quite difficult. But what I learned was to integrate into that team environment, help that person be successful, and at the same time manage the record of competence that we needed. So it's that added value that really started to embed this desire of mine to build this purpose about enabling people to be successful because of the profession I've got.
Leading to here. If you're a leader and have a story to tell, reach out at hello@thinkingfocus.com.
Let's take a little segue for a minute. And what about Ian outside of the world of work? What sort of things have you got yourself into? What sort of things that keep you motivated and energized outside of the world of work?
Yeah, I can do that. So, family man. I've got 3 grown-up children. All have got their own careers. Married to Mandy, who shares the house with me now. We're empty nesters. In the past, one of the things that would stick out, I was a Cub Scout leader for about 12 years. So really enjoyed my time in scouting, and I'm still connected to scouting in many ways.
Right.
I was a rugby coach for 10 years. So I took a team of young men from the age of about 8 or 9 all the way through to about 18, coaching them about how to play rugby. I've been a Duke of Edinburgh award leader, so spending what you might think is exciting times up at hills, walking. No, I would spend hours sitting at a gate waiting for the DofE team to come past, thinking, where the hell are they? So yeah, Duke of Edinburgh award leader. Very much a supporter of young enterprise. So I've been a regional judge for young enterprise in the past for the Black Country, and I'm actually going back to being a supporter of young enterprise this year. Also, had an experience of in the scouting context. I was author of the Scouting Entrepreneurs Badge.
Oh,
which was a fascinating point in my life. I'm not sure the badge still exists, but it was at a moment in time we created the first Scouts Entrepreneurs Badge, which was a brilliant time.
so the encouraging young kids to become more entrepreneurial and to give things a go and have some sort of enterprise skills.
Yeah. Which if you think about it, most scouts have got this anyway. So they'll run fairs and fetes to raise money. Well, it's just a business.
Car wash. I remember doing a car wash when I was in the baggy green cap.
Aren't you old enough to remember Bob Job, Ricky?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, I am, sadly.
Bobby Job Week.
Bobby Job.
Yeah, I remember doing my Bob Job, and I was going down the road with my bucket and soap to wash people's cars, and I knocked on this door of a neighbour, and he said, "Yeah, of course you can wash my ice cream van."
Did you get rewarded with an ice cream?
No, I got a bob. He literally said, "Well, it's Bob Job, there's the money, off you go." I can't remember whether I got an ice cream or not. I just remember thinking, "You've had me over there, fella."
He has, yeah. He's done you there. But again, all these sorts of interests as well, Ian, I can see listening to you talk, again, that's playing into this purpose, isn't it? Because actually you're helping people there to achieve things, to push them beyond the comfort zones, maybe to achieve more than they perhaps thought that they possibly could. And that chimes for you, I think. That really comes through as something that is fundamental for you.
Well, I think when you look at Ian's entire CV, it's kind of the golden thread is this helping everyone, which is in your purpose statement, Ian, in everyone, and that obviously plays through both in professional terms and in terms of these these side interests of your rugby coaching, your scouting, and the Duke of Edinburgh. So everything that you do is about helping everyone to be that bit better than they were yesterday.
Yeah, I'd hate it to sound completely one way, because it's not. Because I just really enjoy it. I think it's great fun to see success. It's brilliant to be part of it. And one of the things that through all of those outside of work activities, there's one thing that I remember, and that's that you never know when you're creating those moments for people.
Mm.
You never know. I remember, Cubs when they go on Cub camp. They don't sleep very well. Then some of them miss home, and they have quite difficult experiences at Cub camp. And I remember one night, I think it was 4 a.m, at a local campsite, and there was one tent of lads playing up, and like I probably would have been when I was a Cub. and me and this other leader said, "Oh, we're not going to get any sleep. Let's just go and do something." So me and this other leader went and got this tent of lads, and it was actually lads and girls. We said, "Right, you lot, come on, we're going." I said, "What? It's 4 a.m." I said, "Yeah, well, you're not going to sleep, so let's go and do something." And we ended up in a field looking up at the stars and talking about the stars. The other leader was really into his astronomy, and we saw the space station go over and stuff. The reason I tell you that story is because it was years later. Someone in my local town said, "Hey, yeah, I remember you." I said, "Oh, I don't remember you, fella." He said, "No, I was a Cub." He said, "But you took me out one night with my mates, and you didn't tell us off. You didn't give us a hard time. You just helped us have what was, in fact, actually, a really nice moment." He said, "We thought we were going to get really badly told off, and you just didn't do it." And I thought, I had no idea I was creating that moment for you then.
Yeah,
I
made a memory.
I was fed up with you and thought, what can we do that's a bit more interesting?
Yeah, I mean, but we do. You touch people's lives, don't you, with things, good or bad. And actually, if part of your purpose every day is to think, how can I help people? How can I make, whether it's your kids, whether it's friends, colleagues, whatever, customers, how can I make things a little bit better for you? Because, let's be honest, we live in challenging times, don't we? And everyone has things going on in their life. So it's a good observation, Ian, actually, that just by doing something that seemed quite simple, you had that impact.
There's plenty of the other side of the coin. So I'll bump into normally big fellas now who used to play rugby in the team that I was coaching, and they'd say, "You used to drive me insane," because I was the fitness coach. So I would be the one that made them throw up their McDonald's that they'd eaten on the way to training because I made them run too hard. So there's plenty of other experiences, but they still remember the experience,
Let's build on that a bit then. So, more difficult experiences. So what have been the more challenging things for you in your career? Has there been anywhere, whether it was one of the companies you've talked about already, or maybe when you moved on, where have you come across something that's been really challenging and you've had to get your teeth into it to try and get through it?
Yeah, it's a couple of experience. I got a personal experience where I was being micromanaged. That was deeply disturbing for me. Because the micromanager was, for all sorts of reasons, believing it was the right way to be, and it wasn't going to work. And I think I went through what most people would see as a really simple, straightforward model. Can I change them? No, because they've had all the feedback. I've really worked hard. They don't care. They're not going to change. That's them. Second question was, can I change how I think about this? And I tried for a while. I really did try not to care, but I couldn't, so I had to leave. And it was really straightforward, very clinical. I can't change the person. I've tried, I've coached, I've instructed, I've given feedback, I've done all the things that you would normally do in the face of a micromanager.
Yeah.
I couldn't change how I think about it. And I remember talking to my family at the time and them saying, "Oh, you should care a bit less," but you can't, can you? I remember one of my kids saying, "But Dad, you care, so you're not going to do that."
It's very difficult, that one, yeah. Just care a bit less. I mean, how do you turn that off?
Yeah, turn that down, please.
Yeah, it's like when people say, "Oh, can we just take the emotion out of the room?" So, okay, I'll just get up and leave then,
Yeah.
But no, that was very difficult because I actually enjoyed the job. It was something that I really wanted to do. But all of those things that you hear, people leave managers, not companies, people leave managers, not jobs, all of the negative impact of micromanagement was there to be seen. And actually, I remember thinking I might have fed it myself as well, because I was looking for things about how do you cope with micromanagers on Google, and it would give you this advice, and I'd try it out and it wouldn't work. So no, eventually I ended up having to leave that.
Yeah.
With that, so leave that person. And then from a professional perspective, my role has been made redundant twice in my career. The first time was at Royal and Sun Alliance. And interestingly, I at the time I got my notice, I was going around the country delivering training sessions for managers on how to deal with redundancies. So we do a morning of technical. This is how the process works. This is what it feels like. This is what this is how you make someone redundant or someone's role. Always remember that it's always someone's role. And then in the afternoon, we'd bring actors into the room and say, right, what's the thing you're scared of most? The manager might say, I don't want anyone to shout at me.
And then you'd role play it, sort of thing.
You got this 6'3" actor who could really shout at someone, and the next minute he could cry like a baby if you were scared of someone crying, just to get people to experience it. And I remember someone saying, yeah, but you don't know what it feels like. And I said, well, actually, I had my notice on Monday as well, so I did.
So in the middle of all that, you were told you were going.
Yeah.
That must have been really tricky for you then, because you're trying to help people with something, but you've got a load emotionally going on that's completely connected to that situation. So how did you handle that?
I guess I compartmentalised it because I've got a young family of my own. I've been asked to leave an organisation that I really did love and enjoy, and it was compartmentalising it in the training room. In my life, I'm always lucky to have had the full support of my family. My family are not, they just want me to be happy, without a doubt. There's no other purpose for them. They just wanted me to be happy. So, but I remember not being quite as panicked as I would, as you think. It was about, okay, well, I've got this concept going on. I'm training people about how to think about it. I've now got to do it myself. So having that ability to have been in a situation and able to empathise with someone, again, I think that's a core risk management skill.
Empathy.
It really is.
So talk us through your home serve experience then. You had 10, I would say, interesting years.
Yes.
Looking from the outside inwards, and talking to you on many times about it.
Well, I think at times, Ricky, you might have been on the inside looking out as well with for a while. Yeah, so I joined Home Serve as their head of training and competence to help them with the same sort of stuff I'd done at Aon. I'd left Aon because they were in London. That role was being made redundant, and I decided to focus a bit more on. I was looking for a financial services firm in the West Midlands that needed someone like me, and Home Serve popped up as one of those organisations. And I joined them as head of training and competence. Not an easy gig because it was, we've got to do this. The regulator's expecting us to have someone in this job, but we can't really understand it. And I think in the early days, I wasn't very successful at that because I was trying a little bit too hard, to be honest. Fascinating organisation. So they sell plumbing and drainage insurance. Very successful, run by a really successful guy. FTSE 100, but decent sized firm. And my early days were not that successful there. I was trying to find a way for me and for my purpose, but they were very compartmentalised in what they expected of me.
But I think there's probably in your early days, if I understand and remember this right, there was probably a cultural mismatch at that point.
Yeah, without a doubt, yeah.
But that flipped at a certain point too, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I think it did for many people. in HomeServe. They'd a change of leadership, and they'd got their struggles, as it were, from a regulatory perspective, and that's all part of the history. And it was a busy old time, busy, challenging time. But by the time I left, I was working with the guy who was running the company at the time, Greg, really, really inspirational guy. You know, you can look, a guy called Greg Reed. And Greg Reed put his arm around me at a certain point in my career and said, come on, you can do this over here, couldn't you? Because I've spotted you and you can help us do this. And I ended up in a much more influential risk management position within their functions, helping them do what I think I was developing a real skill to do, which was develop and implement risk management frameworks, strategies, culture. And Greg had my back. He absolutely had my back. I remember him saying at one point, I can't remember who he said it to. It was a group of people. And he said, just so you all know, I've given Ian this job and I would work for him.
If you enjoy Leading to Hear, listen to our sister podcast, The Question Is, by Thinking Focus.
So now then, you start to get this almost like an apex of your risk background, your people background. You've got to start to create this culture that you talked about earlier of seeing risk as an opportunity for us to be successful rather than something that is a blocker. So how did you go about starting to implement this culture then? What were the things that you brought in to the organisation?
Ooh, what a good question. I think a little bit of me, well, a lot of me, obviously, but I've got some skills about enthusiasm. I got a real desire to help people. So it's hard for me to be involved in a job and be a problem for them. Sometimes, you know, quite often I'll be saying no, but in a well-reasoned and explained way. But actually just getting involved in the real business, not being on the side of it, watching or observing and being judgmental. I think many people in risk or compliance roles can be quite judgmental of people, you know, within a business. And I can't find a way of doing that. What I tried to do, and what I think we did quite successfully, was create a helpful culture where customers actually started to emerge as the key driver for risk. So I've got this belief that if you focus on your customers, your risk management is pretty straightforward. And most of the risk conversations I had in HomeServe were around customers. How do you put the customer first? How do you explain your marketing to customers in a really clear way? How do you help your people behave in a way that's appropriate to customers? How do you make things effortless for customers? And I wasn't the only one doing this. I was riding on a wave created by Greg and his leadership team of a cultural change to really face that business into its customers. And it was exciting, challenging, and inspirational to see that happening. And you know, the many people that I worked at that time talk about that time with great fondness, and have learned so much. And certainly the team I created there, they have all gone on to do amazing jobs elsewhere, and some of them are still at HomeServe. But the time we created there together was a real pivotal moment for all of us. Another moment when you don't realise how important it is, I guess.
I remember that. I remember seeing you in the before and after phases of this, and I was just blown away by the change in you. From, you know, you used the term enthusiasm, and I think it almost had a lift-off moment when I came to see you when Greg had arrived and started to have his impact on the business, you know, culturally, you know, this making it simpler for the customer, just making it no nonsense, all of those things. And I think you really got swept into that, and that played to your cultural fit. And I, you know, I'm not sure I've ever seen you as happy as when you were in that moment. Yeah. You know, working with Greg, he was driving, and he's a demanding guy, but did it in a way where you never felt like you were being pushed. It was always, can I keep up type way, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And again, it wasn't all roses. I remember being in a room with Greg as his risk manager and trying to make a point. I remember saying to Greg, I said, but Greg, you should care. And he said, whoa, in his American accent. And he said, well, Ian, I absolutely do care. I've thought about this risk. I really understand it. Your perception that I don't care is wrong. I do care. I just don't want to do anything about it because I'm happy at that risk. And it was a real moment for me to understand how to be a risk manager with someone who's emotionally intelligent and intellectually intelligent and knows what they're doing. It's like, okay, how can I enable your success then? Because we're working together now. It was a real together moment.
I remember fondly a time where you got us to come in and work with some of the people at home, so some of the senior guys, and we were tying, I think it was about 40 or 50 people. We tied them up on the helipad, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
With a thinking exercise, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I think some of those photos came up on my feed lately, and the good news is, Ricky, none of us look any older now, do we?
Yeah.
So how have you taken those experiences working with Greg and taking the organisation at the time on this cultural journey? How have you taken those experiences into where you are today, then, Ian, in a global major bank? Yeah,
so I think I was thinking about this because I'm like all people in what are perceived to be big roles. I've got, you have a little bit of an imposter syndrome at times. You think, crikey, am I doing the right thing? Do I know what to do? And funnily enough, at times I've got some notes about some of the things that were pivotal to me at my time working with Greg, and I use them. So one of the things I've done is there are moments when those experiences leak out of you. You can't help but take an experience out of your kit bag and reflect it into what you're doing today. And some of those experiences, I think, have helped me build some gravitas in the role that I do. So I quite often find myself telling stories, reflecting on things that bring things to life in a way that enable people to think. Does that make sense? So you're trying to come up with a connecting story that takes someone in a situation trying to manage risk to a solution, but you've got this bridge, which is the story. And quite often those stories come from my time with Greg and the team at HomeServe. So that was that experience. It's actually using the experience to great value, not just having it behind you. And I bring those experiences. You've got me to talk about experiences through my life today. Quite often I'll bring them right up into the present moment and say, have you thought about it this way? I remember a time when, and it's like you use them to help people think better.
But I think you also go, you have seen, risk at its most extreme. You've plumbed the depths in terms of microscopic attention of a regulator.
Yeah.
And more importantly, you know how to come out the other side. So not only can you talk with authority on the subject, but you also go, my job's to stop us getting there, but also, we know how to shift the culture in order to address some of the challenges that you faced in the past.
Yeah. And one of the typical questions you get asked as a risk manager is, what's going to happen? What's your horizon scanning look like? And none of us can tell the future. None of us can. But having that confidence to help people when they're in crisis to say, okay, let's take a breath. Let's think about what we need to do. Let's think about the impact of what we're doing and then create a way forward. It's that moment when I think your risk manager really comes to life, when there's a bit of panic or a bit of concern or a bit of something going on and you can give it a context. We've got experiences in our personal lives, I'm sure, where that happens.
And there's a similarity, I think, there for, if you think about a really good finance director, what they'll do is they'll make the numbers mean something.
Yeah.
And what you're talking, and through maybe telling a story, and what you're talking about is very similar, isn't it? Yes, we could all look at risks, but what might the impact be, and what might that mean for us, and therefore how do we navigate through whatever they are. So I think there's a similarity there, that it's not just being able to point them out, but it's having the skill to turn them into something that's meaningful for individuals and for a business.
And some ideas as well, Richard, about how to help people think about those things. One of the things I often do is I'll get everyone in the room to get their phone out and look at their weather app.
Yeah.
And I'll say, right, okay, what does your weather app say? And he said, well, it's 25% likely to rain today. Okay, what does that actually mean? And when you do that in a room, you realise that everyone's got a different perspective about how to assess likelihood.
Yeah.
The purest sum of risk management is what's likely to happen, how likely is it, and if it did happen, what's the impact? And a couple of those things, what is likely to happen, that's difficult to assess sometimes given our ability to horizon scan and see into the future. The likelihood of it happening, that's really difficult because there are so many methodologies and you've got a personal perspective. The easiest bit, funnily enough, is the impact. So if that did happen, what would happen? And you can play that out in a stress test or a scenario plan.
Yeah.
In very many ways. And as long as you've got a clear line of sight to how you do the impact, it is that likelihood. And it's one of the things that I know operational managers struggle with, because they might see something that needs to be done, and the likelihood will help them understand how urgent it is for that thing to be done.
Yeah.
So if it's likely to hurt someone today, we'll do something today. But if it's possible it might hurt someone in 6 to 12 months, well, we might have a bit more time to think about how we do things.
What, at this stage of your career then, Ian, what are you hopeful for and excited about?
Well, I'm hopeful that the skill and the talent of risk managers is starting to emerge as a really important part of business success. I know at least one brilliant risk manager who's recently become CEO. Now, your pathway to CEO didn't normally start from a risk perspective.
No.
But I would profess I have to know pretty much as the leader of my function about every part of my function. And we cover a huge range of activity globally. But I'm the risk guy that has to try and understand it all. So you get that perspective. So I'm really hopeful that the skill, the T-shaped skill of risk management is seen as adding value. The thing I'm excited about right now is, sorry to say it, artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay.
When you think about that pure sum of risk management, the likelihood, the what might happen, and then the impact, almost all of that can be helped by artificial intelligence. By using artificial intelligence in the right way to examine the data that we might or might not have, to then understand how to manage risk better. And as I said, risk management is what's likely to happen, how likely is it, and then if it did happen, what would be the impact? And AI can work all about that, or help us risk managers do that. It won't do it for us, but it'll help us do that in a much better way. Because I guess in my world, I've got more data than one human being could ever cope or absorb, but AI can. So there's something really fascinating about how we use the data, use AI to then enable leaders to make better decisions. And I am, as you can possibly tell, quite excited about that.
I suppose it's like anything, though, isn't it, Ian? It depends on the quality of the data that you've got or AI's got. But yeah, that's gonna really sort of speed things up and give you more depth potentially to be able to make.
And I'm fascinated by the risks about AI. So one of the biggest risks I've got at the moment in terms of AI, I won't say biggest. One of the risks around AI is that people believe it.
But I think that's really plays back to your strengths, though, doesn't it? Because AI can do all the analysis, it can assess the risk, it can give you a framework, if you like. But fundamentally, it still needs people like you to translate that, coach people through that, what it means. Because It's almost becomes, is it the lazy way of doing things? Because you've still got a human being that needs some help interpreting what that means for me in those moments of truth that you've talked about throughout this entire episode. You've talked about, it's the moments that make us make the difference, and therefore, how do we make sure that AI doesn't control those decisions? It informs those decisions.
There's a dark part of my thinking that thinks that people who don't understand risk management look for a tick box. Yes, I've managed that risk, tick.
Yeah.
And if they have that mindset, AI might provide them with a tick.
Yep.
So we might see a downturn in terms of the skill of risk management and the contextualizing of data and the understanding of the humanity behind risk management. We might see a downturn in that for a short while AI settles in, but the skill of the risk manager will still be needed all the way through that journey. And I think there'll be a resurgence of okay, so now you're seeing that there is a fundamental need to understand human behavior, how decisions are made, and the impact of those decisions. And that's where you've got to have people in the room doing it.
So, Ian, as we come to the end, we like to ask you 3 quick questions. Okay?
Okay.
So, quick questions, quick answers.
Let's do it.
Right, ready. Number 1. So, as you look back, what's one thing that you're most proud of?
My family, my children's achievements.
One thing you do differently if you could go back?
I'd probably enjoy life a little bit more rather than be so intensely focused on certain things at certain times. Try and bring a bit of joy to all aspects of what I'm doing.
And one thing that gives you the energy to keep going every day?
No quick answer. Crikey, that's not good, is it? The energy I get comes from creating success for other people. So seeing that success and thinking about how to do more of it. So how to get more of that excitement of creating more success. Not a quick answer, but I think that's where I end up.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Ian. Thanks very much for your time. You've been really generous with your time. Thanks for being with us on Leading to Here.
Thank you, Ian.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. Good to chat.
Okay, Ricky. Fascinating chat with Ian. What stood out for you as you reflect?
Well, what was really interesting is when you first look at a CV of somebody that's in risk, compliance, control, you kind of go, oh, is this going to be interesting? And actually, Ian made a really dry topic come alive, and I think that's about him and his personality. That was how he kind of lifted it off the page and went, no, it's about these things. It's not about process. It's about people. Well,
you can see why he's had a really successful career in it, because he's made it meaningful to other people, hasn't he? And I thought when he said it's not just about threat, it's about opportunity. Yeah, he did. He talked about this two-sided coin that says, yes, we need to manage the threat, but also how do we use our attitude towards risk to leverage the opportunities? Yeah, you could imagine that the way he operates is, he said that thing about one of the companies he'd worked with. What did he call himself? Tailgun Charlie or something? Tailgun Charlie, yeah. They bring him in right at the end, and he's gone, no, bring me in early, because if you bring me in early, I can help you navigate some of the challenges that you might come across, rather than seeing him or the risk function as someone that's going to stop things. What he wants to do is enable things, doesn't he? And that flipping it, I think, really came through to me as how we started to build cultures where this is at the centre of the thought process. Yeah, because I think what he was fighting with, having spent, like you, time in the financial services arena, historically, compliance type people were, no, you tell me what you want to do and I'll tell you whether you can do it. And he's going, no, I want to flip that and say, right, help me to understand what you're trying to achieve, and we'll work how we do that by balancing and managing the risk along the way. Well, you end up thinking you can't do anything. You daren't do anything. Yeah, of course you do. And of course, we know then creativity's lost and passion's lost because you just feel like you're caught up in red tape and chains, and you don't suggest anything or do anything.
And I think, to your point, that's why he stands out in his field, because he starts with, let's work out if there's a solution and what that solution might look like that meets everybody's needs, rather than just, we'll tell you whether you can or you can't. But I think that leads into this progressive attitude towards risk that he's got, that says, look, it's about balance. It's about managing. It's not about eliminating. It's about, and he used the example from one of his kind of influencers in Greg, who said, well, I do care. I just accept that the risk is acceptable to me.
And what were your thoughts on, his purpose and wanting to really help people and help people achieve more than they thought possible?
Well, you kind of look at it to start with going, what does that really mean? And then as he brings that to life through the interview, as he brings it to life through the examples, where he always starts with the individual or with the group. And it just is like a golden thread through his entire CV, through his career, where actually everything he does is about helping people to be better at what they do, even at times people not related to the job that he does. So, he talked about in his career, he got involved in training and developing people on other things, not just on the subject matter expertise that he had. And I think, that also played out in some of his personal life in terms of, the rugby teams that he's coached and helping scouts and treating them in a way that made them feel like they were valued, rather than just going to be having a rocket for playing up at 4 a.m, I think he said, wasn't it?
Yeah, taking people to look at the stars at 4 a.m. And like many people that we've interviewed in this series, whether it be, Michael Smith or Barry Mellis or lots of the other great people that we've interviewed, you know what? He's just a really nice person. And that skill, I don't know the right word, but you take people with you naturally, don't you? If you're a nice person, people want to go with you, work with you.
Well, it really does play into our goal with this particular series, which is that shining a light on people who don't get to share their voice. And I think that's probably one of Ian's, he will happily talk about the impact he's had on others, but is less, there is definitely no self-promotion going on here. It's all about, no, let me tell you about when I did this with somebody and we helped them and now they're, doing this great role, or they've moved on to bigger and better things. And he illustrates his contribution through others. And that's about this passion statement, this personal statement of his that says, my purpose, that to create a personal collective success, enabling everyone to achieve more than they believe possible. And that shines through in everything that he does.
Thanks for joining us today. Please share, like and subscribe Leading to Here. If you'd like to know more about us at Think in Focus, then feel free to drop us a note at hello@thinkinfocus.com or just visit Think in Focus online. And remember, please join us next time for more insights from relatable, interesting, everyday people as we discuss their journey to here.
Leading to Here. For more episodes, visit us at thinkingfocus.com/leading to here.